Okay, it's wonderful to see everyone. Thank you for being here today. Hopefully you all know that this is part two of a two-part lecture that Sue has developed about, or entitled the Secret Doctrine Made Easy. The first one was in October of 2019 and covered cosmogenesis, and this one will cover anthropogenesis. And Sue, our speaker, for those of you who don't know, is a mental health therapist who is in private practice in Seattle, has worked for over 40 years with children, couples, families, and individuals. She has been a student of Theosophy since she was a young adult, and she is also a published author, the author of Realizing the Self Within, and an overview of the concepts of spirituality that can be applied to relationships and self-improvement. So I will give Sue the floor. I look forward to hearing what she has to say about anthropogenesis.
Well, thank you, Caitlin. Glad to see everybody here. So Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, and we may call her HPB or Blavatsky, she founded the Theosophical Society with Henry Steele Olcott in 1875. And she wrote her magnum opus, The Secret Doctrine, in 1888. This was her major work, and it followed her first success of Isis Unveiled in 1877. And The Secret Doctrine was widely anticipated, so that the first 500 copies that were going to be printed were sold out before they came off the press. And they've been continuously in print since then. So the first book, Cosmogenesis, as Caitlin mentioned, covers the origin and evolution of the universe. And I gave a talk on that prior to this. And this talk is on anthropogenesis, and that deals with the appearance of the first human beings as they progress into who we are today. So what is the secret doctrine? It is the accumulated wisdom throughout the ages, and it has been referred to as the perennial wisdom or the ancient wisdom. So it's basically principles, laws, and knowledge known and expressed throughout time. And Blavatsky, quote, this is a quote from her, she said, it's the uninterrupted record of thousands of seers whose experiences verify the traditions passed down orally and who watch over humanity. So why is this considered secret information? It's because it's beyond words. It is deeper than the exoteric doctrines of the world's religions that are given to the general public. It's an esoteric or it has an inner hidden meaning that is understood with the intuition to perceive what is under the symbolism. So an example, an easy one, is the point that we're all one. So we are all one humanity, but someone may say, well, my body ends where my skin ends, and your body starts where you are. We're not one. Well, at the higher levels of consciousness, we truly are one. And so that's an example. And because there are no words for the ancient wisdom, it's been communicated by allegory, myth, and legend to convey the hidden truths. So the secret doctrine attempts to explain what these myths mean and to correlate them with traditions around the world. So how did HPB get her information? She was an occultist and a mediator, not a medium. So a medium is someone who goes into a trance and they lose consciousness of their body and they actually depart from their body, so that a disembodied soul can use the body or their mind to do or say or think whatever they want. Now, some good information has been communicated this way, others not so good, but Blavatsky was a mediator. So what happened with her is that when she would clairvoyantly see something or be able to work with a master, she maintained her self-conscious awareness the entire time so that her faculties were alert and awake, and there was no loss of consciousness when this was going on. So the Secret Doctrine is based on the stanzas of Dijon, and this comes from the book of Dijon. So stanzas mean verses. So there's several verses in the book of Dijon. And the cousin to Blavatsky, Boris de Zherkov, said that this could be found in the monasteries in Tibet in their libraries. So HPB traveled to Tibet, and where she underwent some occult training, and she became acquainted with it then. Now, Dijon, D-Z-Y-A-N, is the Tibetan and Sanskrit or Mongolian way to say the Sanskrit word dhyana. And this means meditation. And also jnana, now I'm saying that phonetically, but it's jnana, and that means wisdom. So this is the ancient wisdom. So in Blavatsky's clairvoyance, she was able to visualize a manuscript that had black pages. And the first page in the manuscript looked like this. And this represents the unity from which we all proceed and return. And the circle's a perfect symbol for this because there's no beginning or end. And each point on the circle is equidistant to the center. Blavatsky said so this unity is a circle with no circumference. Or, and I'm going to share a screen here. The Secret Doctrine, let's see, make this big for you. Made easy. Now I'm going to go back a little bit to some things. There's HPB and Henry Steele Olcott when they were in India, and so the beard on Olcott was quite long then. And then the Secret Doctrine with the two books. And then this is Henry Steele Olcott when he was a young man. And then Blavatsky as a younger woman. And then there's Blavatsky as she's older. And then this is what Blavatsky, oh, sorry, I decided to, that's what the Secret Doctrine is. I've already said this to you, so I'll pass this. So Pascal quoted Hermes Trismegistus, and he was the Egyptian sage, and he defined God as God is a sphere whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere. And the Christians would call this God, Muslims Allah, the Zoroastrians Ahura Mazda, the American Indians, Native Americans may say Wakan Tonkin, or the Masons, the great architect of the universe. So it's said by various cultures, but this is what Blavatsky says in her definition. It's the one life, the eternal, the invisible, yet omnipresent, without beginning or end, unconscious yet absolute consciousness, unrealizable, the one self-existing reality. And then in Genesis, in the first book of the Christian Bible, as well as the first book of the Jewish Pentateuch, or the Old Testament, this is what is described. Darkness was upon the face of the deep. And that's referring to this darkness, like you can even think of space. It's all dark up in space, beyond the atmosphere of the earth. And then from the stanzas itself, it refers to the darkness that breathes over the slumbering waters of life. And at this point, there's no manifestation. This is just nothingness, or pralaya. And this one from the stanzas of Dijon, the hour had not yet struck, the ray had not yet flashed into the germ. So you can hear some of the poetic nature of the stanzas of Dijon. So then the next page of Blavatsky's manuscript that she's seeing, there's a point in the center of the circle. And this is the start of manifestation. And in Genesis, it speaks about it in this way. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And then from Zarathustra, the author of the Holy Book of the Zoroastrians, 13th or 14th century before current era, he, Mazda, first created by means of his own light. And that's the Avesta. So you can see the similarities across cultures. And then in the New Testament, in John, in him was life, and the life was the light of men, and the light shineth in the darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. So you can see how it's similar to Blavatsky's definition. So I'll be going back to speaking to you directly. So this is referred to as the first root race. Now, this isn't a race like the anthropological differences among humans now. It's basically the first outpouring of humanity, or the first wave of humanity. And it's referred to as the self-born, or the Chahayas. And this was still a very spiritual being. Then the next page on Blavatsky's manuscript looked like this, where the point in the center became a diameter that's horizontal. And this is the divine feminine. And it has also been similarized to water. So water is in creation stories around the world as part of the start of everything. Now in this is the third root race, and it's on the continent of Lemuria, and it is the Lemurians. So let me see if I'm doing this correctly. Sorry, I made a mistake on my notes. This is the Sweatborn. I'm so sorry. And it is the Hyperborea is the continent for that. And it's been referred to as the inhalation of the great breath. So it's the next level, which is now a diameter that's vertical. And this is the divine masculine. And this is the third root race on Lemuria. And I have a slide for this. Pretty interesting. Darkness vanished and was no more. It disappeared in its own essence, the body of fire and water, of father and mother. This is from the stanzas. Now we're being introduced to father and mother, the genders, and they're not distinct sexes yet. They're still one and the same. And this is referred to as the royal androgyne, or the hermaphrodite. And that has both male and female characteristics within the same being. And the Greek Hermaphrodites is an example of this. And I'll be speaking about that myth in a minute. And so the fourth root race, the beginning of that, so with this page, the circle disappears, and we have, it forms a swastika, which I'll be getting to you about this in a moment, but it breaks away to a cross. And this is the fall of mankind. And this is the Atlantean root race, the fourth root race. And it is symbolic of humanity as in the physical body and of the separation of the sexes. And so we have a depiction of this in the glyph for Venus. and it is a circle over a cross. So the cross is humanity or human being, then the spirit is always within us or over us, is the circle. Then we also have it in the Ankh, the circle, which has been elongated a bit, but it's over the T. So if you can imagine, this is the diameter and then a radius, but this wouldn't be here. This is the spiritual part. So that's the T inside this symbol. So what I'd like to do is move to a discussion of the levels of consciousness within a human being, and I'll be referring to this. Now this can look difficult with these Sanskrit words, but don't worry about them. So the lowest level is our physical body, and that's pretty obvious. We all know where those are. And then within the physical body, we have a double, which is called the etheric double, or the vital body. This is the Linga Sharira, and this is the form and the outline within us, and it's the vehicle for prana, the third level of consciousness. Now, prana, you've probably heard of that, or as chi or ki. Chi in China, ki in Japanese. This is the life force within us, the vitality. And it can be felt as energy coming off the body. You can put your hand close to your body and feel the heat, but also a sense of energy. Or even between your hands, you can get a sense of a bounciness. Now, those who are trained in therapeutic touch learn to sense this prana. Then the fourth level of consciousness is kama. This is the desire body and the emotions. And there is no mind in all of these. These represent, in Egyptian times, the pyramid, the square at the base of the pyramid, these four levels of consciousness. And then the upper triangles, there's three, are the Trinity. And they are formed by Manas. And Manas has both the higher and lower mind. So when our minds are thinking about our schedules or planning things, it is Kama Manas. But with our higher self, Buddhi Manas is the higher mind, where we can think abstract thoughts, and our intuition is translated down into our minds. Then the sixth level of consciousness is Buddhi, the field of intuition. And then the seventh is Atman, the absolute or unity, or God, or the one life. And everything in the world is made up of Atman. And then Buddhi, they're together. Buddhi is the vehicle for Atman, and it's together these form the monad in theosophical terminology. So, and you may have questions, but I'll forge on and then be sure and put them into chat or keep track. So I'd like to chat a little bit about Fohat. So this wonderful power. So the circle broke away and made Fohat. This is the power that impels manifestation. It brings about the separation of spirit into matter. And Blavatsky describes it in the Secret Doctrine as Fohat is the guiding power of all manifestation. Thus, from spirit comes our consciousness through Fohat. It is the mysterious link between mind and matter, the animating principle electrifying every atom into life. And then this next slide depicts it even more fully. Fohat, among other energies, is electricity, magnetism, sound, light, heat, and cohesion. So you can see that Fohat is the general term for all these different types of energies. And so even the chemistry between two people is caused by Fohat, or the energy that's in that chemistry is Fohat. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the first root race. I just introduced those. And for those of you not familiar with this can seem quite an unusual description that I'll be presenting. And it's useful to remember what Buddha said. He said, believe nothing, not by any authority, But if something seems to be reasonable and logical, try it on as a theory until you know it to be true. So just listen to these various descriptions and use that discretion or the theory aspect that Buddha talked about. So after Pralaya, a time with no manifestation, the first human beings were the first root race, and they were called self-born. And they came from a class of angels called Dhyani Chohans. Now, in the angelic hierarchy, the Dhyani Chohans are very high in that. And they've been around and evolved to that place. And it comes from Dhyani, which is like dhyana, which I showed you at the beginning. That means meditation and wisdom. And Chohan means Lord. So through the will of these angels, the will is Kriya Shakti in Hinduism. The angels exuded the human beings in their image. So, and they're referred to as shadows or chahayas. So what they did through their will, they made a copy of themselves, and this would be the Linga Sharira, the etheric double, and it's the model body. And this is on the astral plane, so we couldn't see it. But Blavatsky gives an idea of what this is like when she said that it's similar to what happens at a seance with certain mediums. Now, in Blavatsky's time, there was so much interest in spiritualism, and people were going to mediums or seances in hopes of talking or learning information about someone who had passed on and died. And Blavatsky said that certain mediums might have a form that would ooze out of their body. And she said that this would normally just vanish, but it could be made more solid with the effect of the will. So this is how the first root race was created. And this took, according to Blavatsky, 103 million years. So you can see this was a long process. And this first root race had no thinking mind. There was no speech or anything like that. Now, throughout the Secret Doctrine, Blavatsky relates the concepts that she's teaching to the traditions of the world's religions, not only to give more information, but because the ideas were pretty controversial, she also wanted to substantiate them. And the first root race is corroborated in the Hindu Puranas, that's ancient writings, and it is behind the allegory of Samja. Now, Samja was the consort of Surya, the Hindu sun god and the creator of the universe. And Samja was unable to endure the fervors of her lord. That's how it's described, or to bond with him and mate and on. Or one legend describes that she grew tired of his brilliant light. But anyway, Samja was out of there. She retired to the jungle to perform religious devotions called tapas. And she left behind her chahaya, her shadow, her handmaid. And this was her astral body, the etheric level Linga Sharira, the model body on the astral plane. So the sun was just fine with this. He thought that Samja, that this was still Samja. And so he and the Chahaya got together and they had many offsprings, and manifestation continued with this. So you can see these levels. Now, the first root race of is also symbolized in Adam. And Adam is in the Christian and Jewish creation story of Adam and Eve. So Adam is the first root race, and he is the partner to Eve. And in Genesis, his name is very familiar. And she's admitted, is A stands for a without, and dam in Adam, dam means blood. So at this level of manifestation, there's no blood. There's no physical body with corpuscles or bones or muscles. And it's interesting with Adam, if you put it with Adamah, that's of the earth. And so Adam was created of the earth, with earth and water. And going a little further, earth is humus, and the word humus is the basis for human or humanity. So you can see the linkages here with the language. And so at this point, there's no gender in Adam, and he's the collective name for both man and woman. So after about 100 million years, as I had mentioned, the second root race commences. And this is the sweat-born. And it's on the continent of Hyperborea, and which was a very large continent that stretched across Asia to Greenland. And it had a warm climate. Now, how these beings evolved is the process called budding, where a small portion of the parent entity would be extruding out, ooze out of the parent, and then that smaller part would eventually part company from the surface, and they would grow into the identical of the same parent organism. Now, sea anemones are examples, as well as many vegetables. Later in this root race, the use of spores was the way of procreation, where a single cell would be thrown off the parent organism, and that would grow into a multicellular organism the same as the parent. Now that's evident in our time with bacteria and mosses. But I have a wonderful picture of the anemone. So you can see this picture, the sea anemone, and on the top are the smaller sea anemones that are being extruded out of the main, the parent, and these will go on to part and be their own organism. And then from the stanzas of Dijon, then the second evolved the sweat-born. The sweat drops became hard and round. The sun warmed it, and the moon cooled it and shaped it. The wind fed it until its ripeness. The big drip, the egg of the future third race, first male-female, then man and woman. So I'd like to point out, here's the royal androgyne again, with this male and female with the hyphen. And that's with the characteristics of both a man and a woman within the same organism. So that one Hindu myth that depicts the birth of the sweat-born is that of Kandu. Now, Kandu is the first root race, and he's a sage and a yogi. But Kandu, being eminent, awakens the jealousy of the other gods. And so Indra, the king of the gods, he decides to send one of his female nymphs to tempt Kandu. And this is Pramloka. And she seduces Kandu. And in Kandu's transcendent state, he says that it was as if he experienced 907 years in one day. And this is the Hindu way of tracking time. So when Kandu awakened, he was confused and he was kind of in a stupor. He didn't know what was going on, and he became angry, which scared Pramloka, who flew away. And as she passed by the leaves of the trees, the leaves captured the perspiration off of her skin. And all of this perspiration together formed her offspring, Marisha. So this is the sweat-born. And then Marisha goes on to have many children, which are androgynous or hermaphrodite at first. So Kandu, the first root race, just like Adam. Now, there's a similar type of sweat-born birth with that of Eve. So Eve is created out of Adam's rib. So you take something from Adam and then up comes the female. And that's Adam/Eve with the hyphen, the hermaphrodite. And they go on to have Cain and Abel. And at first they are joined. They are both male and female with the hyphen. And that would be Cain/Hebel. That's the feminine. Cain is masculine. And then, of course, when Cain kills Abel, this is representing bloodletting and the further manifestation of the form into where there's actual blood. And so it's symbolic with this killing. Just a little comment there. Now, HPB says this is also the case with the twins Osiris and Isis, born of the goddess Nut. And then the Hindu creator god Brahma and his daughter Vak. They're also equivalent to this androgyne. And another similar creation story is from the island of Madagascar, where the first man lived the beginning without eating. And this went on for a long time, and he got pretty hungry. So when he finally was able to eat, he indulged himself so much that his legs swelled up and out burst a female, who was the mother of the race. Then a further example of the second root race is the Greek myth that depicts Zeus, the sky god, the king of the gods on Mount Olympus. And he's son of Kronos, or time. So this is, again, the derivation down of the descendants. So Zeus wants to have some brothers and sisters. So he devised a plan where he slips a potion into his father's drink. So when Kronos drinks it, he vomits up all of the brothers and sisters to Zeus. So you can hear this similarity across cultures. Now, during this evolution of the first and second root races, the earth underwent tremendous change with the change of the tectonic plates and the oceans around them. So in the second root race, after millions of years, the movements of the continents changed as well as the axis. And it was not vertical anymore. It started to tip. And so it gave seasons to the world. And I have a wonderful slide to show that. From the stanzas of Dijon. The axis of the wheel tilted. Now the wheel is the earth, and it's circular, like our globe. The sun and the moon no longer shone over the heads of the sweat-born. People knew snow, ice, and frost. Men, plants, and animals were dwarfed in their growth. So what happens is that as these beings further create and evolve, they're becoming more dense in their size. So that's becoming dwarfed in their growth. And so the seasons are being described here. Now the third root race evolved gradually to a race where the egg-shaped aura became more solid and was referred to as the egg-born. And this is on the continent of Lemuria. And this is from Blavatsky. The third race procreated their species by an exudation of vital fluid, the drops of which, coalescing, formed an oviform ball, or shall we say egg, which served as a vehicle for the fetus and child. So this, if you can recall those levels of consciousness, this is not the physical body yet, but prana over the etheric double. the second being the etheric double, and the third level is prana. And so that's going to become more and more this egg around the etheric. And there's still the monad, the seventh, the Atman and Buddhi with these forms. There's no mind yet. And so this is from the stanzas of Dijon, and you can hear the poetic nature of this as I'm showing you these. Bring forth men of your nature, give them their forms within. She, the earth, will build coverings without. Male, female they will be. So you can see the hyphenated. This is still the androgyne. Now we have in nature many examples of the androgyne, like with plants, worms, and snails, where the male and female characteristics are in the same individual, and earthworms are an example. And however, they need to line up next to each other to reproduce for sperm to be exchanged. And you can see how that is done here. So the development of the androgyne, of the third root race, is depicted with the Greek myth of Hermaphroditus. So in Caria, there was a wonderful spring that came out of the earth, and it flowed into a beautiful fountain, over which a lovely nymph presided. One day, a handsome youth who was very thirsty, Hermaphroditus, and he was the son of the Greek god Hermes and the goddess of love, Aphrodite. And he came to the fountain and took a drink, and he was amazed and surprised at how wonderfully it quenched his thirst. And as he laid in the cool water, it was very refreshing to his limbs. Because of that, he came to the fountain daily, which delighted the nymph, who was falling in love with him. And as that proceeded, because of her love for this youth, she pleaded with the gods to allow her to be permanently joined with her lover. And the gods accepted this, and Hermaphroditus was the result, and that was half man and half woman. I just love these myths. So I have a screen to show you that depicts this. So here's a statue of Hermaphrodite with the male parts and then the female breasts. Then this is a fresco of the same with the male parts and the female breasts there. And this is on a piece of a vase, pottery painted, and that's chasing the hair there. And so the wings, this is still the astral plane. The wings depict that. And then the male parts and the female breasts. And then in India, we have Shiva and Parvati in the same person. So Shiva's a masculine, and the Parvati is the female with the sari on. So other examples of the second root race are from the Hindu Puranas, Daksha, who, seeing his will-born progeny would not create man, he converted himself to half female and half man. And then he beget his daughters that way. That's a quote from Blavatsky. Then the Greek Zeus sometimes was shown with female breasts, and then Aphrodite sometimes had a beard. In Egypt, the god Amun was united with the goddess Neith. And in ancient Persia, the Zoroastrian gods Meshia and Meshiane are also examples. But this royal androgyne, however, was missing intellect. Excuse me. Human beings only were living with animal instinct And this continued into the beginning of the fourth root race. They needed their minds. They needed to be able to think and to be able to see the consequences of their actions, to be able to plan things. They also needed to develop spiritual self-consciousness and their intuition. Otherwise, as HPB wrote, man was doomed to degenerate into phallic and sexual worship, or animalism or sensuality. And she said they practiced sorcery instinctively. And this was a type of magic where one's will could control others or make things happen. So the human being needed sacred fire or manas to cognize itself. So, and then the Dhyani Chohans could see this was a problem here. So how did they give man the sacred fire? The Manasa Putras, the Dhyana Chohans, at the midpoint of the third root race, incarnated within the human beings to give them their self-conscious mind. It's quite something. And this has to be grasped by the intuition. This is a high level of consciousness. It's very spiritual, very ethereal. It's not physical yet. And this level is exemplified by the Greek myth of Prometheus. Now, Prometheus was a Greek god responsible for creation. And after Prometheus created the gods, created all the creatures of the earth, which he made out of earth and water, and he made them out of the image of the immortal gods. As he was completed with this, he decided to share the creation process with his gentle and loving brother, Epimetheus, who he was supposed to distribute the qualities that each creature needed to survive. So he gave the gazelles their speed and agility, and he gave the skunk the strong smell and the thick fur to the wolf. Epimetheus was very proud of his accomplishments until he came to the human being, who was there naked and defenseless. And Epimetheus had run out of gifts. There was nothing to give the human. So he was concerned and upset, and he talked to Prometheus, but clever Prometheus thought of a plan. He decided to preserve the human being's survival, he would give them the spark of the sacred fire. But this was up on Mount Olympus, where the god Zeus was reigning. And the god Zeus had his thunderbolts that could be thrown to people, which would break them up. So the sacred fire, though, was needed, and Prometheus was determined to get it. So on the next moonless night, Prometheus crept up Mount Olympus, the home of his cousin, Zeus. And with the help of Zeus's children, and despite the fear of the thunderbolts, Prometheus was able to get the sacred fire and hide it in a fennel stalk and creep back down Mount Olympus. And he was successful and passed on the sacred fire to all human beings. But Zeus could see what's these sparks of the sacred fire in all these people. And he knew that it was taken by Prometheus. So as punishment, he sentenced Prometheus to eternal torment by being chained to a rock each day, where an eagle, the emblem of Zeus, would peck at his liver all day, and he would go to sleep at night, and the liver would grow back just again to be pecked at the next day by the eagle. And Prometheus lived like this for a long time, but eventually the hero Heracles rescued him. And I just might make a comment that if you've ever had Chinese herbs, a lot of times stress and intense emotions that people might have can cause some wear and tear on the liver. like Prometheus's liver. And so they may be giving Chinese herbs to help the liver functions. So I have a slide of Prometheus. So here he is again on a vase, and I've put it so it's easier to see. And now the eagle looks like he's eating at the heart of Prometheus, but it's supposed to be his liver. And then he's bleeding out of his thigh, but that's from his liver bleeding. And so again and again, he's chained there, and you can see he's held by the stalks that is holding him to the rock or whatever he's being chained to there, maybe a pillar, it looks like. So getting the sacred fire is also depicted in the story of Adam and Eve. So when they're in the Garden of Eden, and it's just blissful there, they have everything they need. Pretty soon, a serpent appears, and the serpent tempts Eve with the delicious apple. And this apple is from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The serpent succeeds, and Eve takes a bite, and then she passes it on to Adam, who tastes the apple, and it's wondrous. But this tree, with the knowledge of good and evil, it means that it's the fall of mankind. And that means the fall into human manifestation, physical life. And this is the fourth root race, which I'll speak a little bit more about in a minute. And this is the Atlantean, and this also depicts the separation of male and female. So as shown in these various creation stories, the myths differ in their details, but as HPB says, they are invariably traceable to a fact in nature. So another legend that exemplifies this is that of Cyclops. And this is the one-eyed monster or creature that the Greek writers Homer and Hesiod wrote about in the Odyssey and Theogony. And I have a slide that shows the Cyclops. So this is a Greek statue, still with the bridge of the nose and the two eyes, but it depicts in the center there the third eye. But it was actually higher in the skull. And I'll describe a little bit more about this third eye, but I wanted to show you this slide since I'm here. So this is the pineal gland, this yellow thing here, and this is the front. This is where the forehead, so it receded back and it became what's called was the back eye. So the third root race is the group of people who were one-eyed, and HPB calls it the Deva eye. This is the third eye. And at that level of manifestation, that was still on the astral plane, and that eye functioned as objective vision. And because the human beings were very ethereal, they could see before them and after them. And also they had astral sight, which was knowledge of the future and the past. So that's the Cyclops idea. And now it carried around through various traditions of the world as well, so that in China, there is a man with two faces. He's called double-faced. This is Blavatsky describing this, where he has one face going forward and a back face pointing back. So you could see on the astral plane. And he also had wings. And this is also demonstrated in the Chaldean fragments. So with continued evolution, the separation of the sexes would take place. And the spiritual vision would dim because the third eye lost its purpose. And as HPB writes, the coats of skin were formed over the astral body, And so the third eye atrophied and gave way to the two eyes looking forward. And the pineal gland or pineal gland is in the brain, and it now distinguishes light from dark and emits melatonin associated with patterns of wakefulness and sleep. So the land mass of Lemuria was gigantic, and it stretched, across the Indian Ocean from Africa to India, then to Australia, then across the Pacific Ocean, and then across the Atlantic. It was huge, and I have a map that depicts it. So you can see here in the top picture, it's kind of the brownish orange landmass. And right here is put on top North America to see where we would be, and then South America. And so this was one huge landmass. And then the bottom picture shows the movement of the tectonic plates, where some of these land masses are going to be different continents. And the Lemurians also had wonderful development with cities, and let's read about it from Blavatsky. The Lemurians built large cities under the guidance of the divine rulers, the Dhyani Chohans, and they cultivated the arts and sciences, knew astronomy, architecture, and mathematics to perfection. So I'd like to just make a note about the large size. So the first root race was the largest, very ephemeral, and Blavatsky doesn't describe in the Secret Doctrine anything about the size. But the second root race, she says, was 120 feet high. And then with further evolution, the size would become more compact. So the Lemurians were 60 feet high. And then this decreased to 25 to 30 feet high with the Atlanteans. And as they divided into male and female, more and more compact, but still bigger than we are today. We're the densest and the most compact with our development in the fifth root race. I'll be getting to that in a minute. So HPB makes the point that the human being a titan, very big, was able to fight successfully with the gigantic monsters of the air, sea, and land. And she goes on to write, these are the dinosaurs, the mastodons, and the huge hippopotami, from which the current elephant and hippo are surviving relics. And they decreased in size gradually and proportionately to as humans did. And HBB says that proof of this gigantic race lies in the traditions of the world who speak about this. So the India had their Danavas, the people on Ceylon had Rakshasas, the Greeks had their Titans, and in Egypt, the colossal heroes. And I saw the Colossi of Memnon, huge statue, just beautifully carved out of stone, the smooth surface of the round leg. I was absolutely amazed. In Chaldea, they had Nimrod, the Jews, the Anakim, and the statues around the world that depict the 30-foot high human also represent this. Blavatsky says that these giants of old were what moved the colossal rocks of Stonehenge. And these rocks came from Africa. However, the tectonic plates weren't separated like they are now. But this is where the rocks, boulders came from. And I have some slides. This is a very interesting part. So there's Stonehenge in England, and that's quite a ways away from that landmass. But these are huge, and you can see the size by this person standing next. And then Stonehenge was really something. It was in a circle, and at the solstice, winter solstice sunrise, there'd be an alignment with the features of the earth, maybe a mountain or whatever, various landmarks, as well as with the outside of the circle and then into the altar. And that's where the mystery school initiations were done. And then we also have some slides, and this is Cyclopean architecture. This is the citadel in Greece. It's interesting how the term Cyclopean, it comes from the Cyclops, which was a fact in nature, according to HPB. So these are huge, and you can see by the size of this woman. So I'm going to go back to this. You can see these gigantic boulders. Now, they were built into the side of a mountain. And then this picture shows it also, that huge structure, the size of a man below. Then we have in Bolivia, the Tiwanaku, and they moved those gigantic slabs of rock. And this is the size of the Tiwanaku in Bolivia. And also Lemuria, it was in the Pacific, and it has gone under the Pacific Ocean now, but some highland tops remain, such as Easter Island. Now, it's off the coast of Chile, as you can see, 2,300 miles. And on Easter Island, they have the moai, which are depictions of the fourth root race, 18 million years ago. The human beings were huge. And these are also on, and now this earth has come around these people, the moai, because the earth would have, dust blown in or seeds, whatever. And so this is what they found when they excavated them. And on this guy, it looks like there's some ribs there and other symbolism for the body. And then you can see the size of the people next to these big, gigantic stone statues. And then on the right are other statues, half buried or mostly buried under the earth. And then Blavatsky writes, this is from the stanzas. This is from the very verses. The Atlanteans, built images 9 yatis high, 27 feet or maybe 9 yards high, the size of their bodies. So other islands are similar to this, the Sandwich Islands of the South Atlantic, the Fiji Islands of east of Australia, New Zealand, Samoa, Tahiti. All of these are from Lemuria. And the Aborigines on these islands, even though they were far apart with ocean around them, they described to the Europeans who came and talked with them and studied them, they described that at one time their land was part of an immense stretch of land as big as Lemuria, just as the map showed. And they also had similar beliefs to the other island people and a similar language and similar customs. Isn't that something? So we'll move into the fourth root race. And this is Atlantis, the Atlantean civilization. And this is written about by Plato in Timaeus. Now, the Atlantean root race existed 4 to 5 million years ago, and 100 million years before the Egyptian rise of its civilization. So it's extremely old. So I'm just going to admit somebody here. And the Atlantis civilization, Atlanteans existed a long time, and the last change of the Atlantis continent happened 12,000 years ago, according to Blavatsky. Now, Atlantis spanned the Atlantic Ocean between Europe and North America. And I have another great slide that shows you. So this is called the Atlantic Ridge, and this was Atlantis. So you can see where North and South America are. And this was Atlantis. And it's so interesting because the investigators of this topography discovered that the higher parts of the ridge could not have been made underwater, that they were actually had been mountains, mountain peaks and valleys. And then at the Atlantean root race, this long expanse of time, millions of years, they also had a change of axis. So in the Atlantean root race, the human being attained full physical manifestation, although the body was larger than ours. And as I said, our body is the densest. And the Atlantean civilization flourished just like the Lemurians. And they had cities with aqueducts that brought water from the mountain lakes. People had conveniences and luxuries. And their economic system was one of equality and collective ownership of land and the means of production. But it deteriorated, as we spoke about before. And as the society was filled with corruption and greed and control of others, this is how it's described. This is from the stanzas of Dijon. Then the fourth became tall with pride. The third eye acted no longer. Out of the stone of the mountains, they cut their own images in their size and likeness and worship them. Then continuing on, the waters threatened the fourth root race. The great waters came and swallowed the 7 great islands. All holy saved, the unholy destroyed, along with most of the huge animals. So those are from the stanzas. And then now we're coming to the 5th root race. And this started 100,000 years ago, near the end in the Atlantean era, but it was the seeds of this root race that we're in now. And it's called, our continent is called America. And our 5th race is called Aryan race. And it is after the Sanskrit, which means noble. And you can just exclude how Hitler thought of the Aryan race. But the word also reflects the ancient languages of Iran and India. So our purpose as our 5th root race develops is to develop our minds so that we can understand and sort out our emotions, because we are pretty much under control of our emotions a lot. And so that's our purpose. And the 6th race will appear after cataclysms also in the movement of the tectonic plates. Europe will be broken up, and as well as the Americas. And it's interesting how Blavatsky describes what's going to happen to the North America. It's going to sink below the ocean, except in California, where the San Andreas Fault lies. That and west of it, the land there, including Los Angeles, is going to remain and come up a bit and be an island off the main continent, which will be coming from the Pacific Ocean. So that's west of this island, and that'll be the new land. And as Blavatsky said, our race will die out like the Aztecs. But America has the seeds of the sixth root race because it's strong, our strong admixture of various nationalities. And then the seventh root race will come long after that, but the purpose of that root race will be to develop their connection with Atman, with God. And then for the last slide, I have a portion of a presentation that was made in 1928 by a man named Pape to the Theosophical Society. And he was able to see into the future what the end of the fifth root race would be. And this is what we're evolving into. The man at the end of the fifth root race will have a general physiology that is harmonious, proportionate, and healthy. The psychology of the child will manifest as rapid response to sympathy, compassion in suffering, the power to comprehend principles easily, quick intuitions, thoroughness, sensitivity, and a quick sense of justice, the absence of parrot-like intelligence, and an eagerness to help others. So this certainly gives us hope for the future and a chance to see that as we struggle to develop these positive qualities now, we will eventually evolve into a humanity where these qualities are more automatic and natural in the root races to come. So thank you. And now we'll take questions or comments. And let's see, in the chat, there's a few hellos from people. So nothing else in the chat. And then what about questions from any of you? Did that make sense?
I have a question.
Sure.
It sounds like you said that linguistically human was sort of embedded in the beginnings of the root races in the humus, and I wonder something about whether as we progress, as we continue to evolve, whether human is still sort of a basic definition or whether there's a transcendence of the concept of human.
Very good question. I don't know how spiritual and ethereal we will get. I haven't researched that, but we do have these bodies, and so the human will continue to exist like this with our minds, our brains, and manas. And we are developing our brains to be able to use manas more and more and our intuition. So does that begin to answer your question, or did you have some more you wanted to ask?
It's in the like the futurist movements and the transhumanist movements, that's it, the idea of like what defines human is very important, and when do we surpass our current definition, or have we grown into it fully? And so it's just interesting to think about those questions from this perspective, where the idea of human was embedded in what we would consider to be very non-human race groups.
Yeah, it's something. And we were copies of the angels. Mm-hmm. And some of the pictures of angels are similar to how we look. So I think that what I'd like to do is open it up to the group if there's anyone that wants to respond to this question, because there's a lot of wisdom in a group. And if you make a comment, be sure and unmute yourself. So does anybody have a comment on this or an answer?
Mariana raised her hand.
Excellent.
I'm trying out the technology. Well, I don't have a response to Caitlin's question, but I have a second part to add to that question. Speaking of futuristic human expression. So you talked about the purpose of the seventh root race as connecting to Atman, but I didn't hear what was the purpose of the sixth root race. Could
Oh,
you go into that a little bit?
oh, of course.
As
Yes.
part of, I guess, this two-part question.
Yes.
Thank
Oh,
you.
that's great. And so actually, Caitlin, I don't know how to answer yours any more than what I've said, but that the sixth root race. So we've got mind now in the fifth. We're working to figure out our emotions, and then we're going to be developing our minds more and more to be able to use the intuition or buddhi in the sixth root race. And then Atman, the seventh level of consciousness in a human being, is what we're going to be moving toward at that root race. Now, there's not a lot written about this, so I can't fill in a lot. So maybe your intuition would give you some clues. So, yes, Christopher?
That was really profound. I really thank you for that. Well, everyone. First, the question is about a few things. So if you could pull up the chart on the, well, you don't have to, but you have the different 7 layers of humanity and so forth. I don't mean to make you go through the PowerPoint presentation again, but
Okay, we'll find it. You can keep talking.
yeah. So my thoughts were about that were how we have these different 7 layers of, there you go, 7. Okay, 1. So the first one's the physical body. Second, okay, yeah, okay, here we go. So is humanity evolving as a I don't want to say as a species, but that's the only thing I can think of as like in terms of understanding where how we're evolving. Oh gosh, I'm not sorry. I'm trying to make sense of this question, and it's just
Sure. Yeah, it's
these
hard.
are like these are like levels of consciousness. I'm just wondering if like the if like we could kind of like overlap into these different variations of levels of consciousness within our own fabric of humanity at different times. Does that make sense?
Excellent.
So we're not just in one stage over another stage over another stage. We're just always, we're percolating at different times, you know, like bubbling water or boiling water, you know, it all like starts boiling at different times. But
Perfect.
it's all part of the sea of consciousness. So go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's great. And see, what you did is use your intuition, your sacred fire, to try to put that difficult concept into words. I agree with you. That's what I've been learning with reading the Secret Doctrine, is that we're evolving all of our levels of consciousness all the time, but there's just more of a focus at different points. So like you say, percolating.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay.
Other questions or thoughts?
I could say a couple of things, maybe. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, for sure.
Because I don't have a button. I'm an anthroposophist, so I have a different slant. But in Manas, Bodhi, and Atma, I see that Manas is spirit mind, in which spirit mind becomes a spirit self. And in Bodhi, you have life spirit becoming spirit life. And Bodhi is an intermediary between Manas and Atma, so that the spirit life, then in Atma, the spirit self becomes spirit being through Bodhi. And I can describe that as I got here late. I'm sorry, I meant to be here sooner. And
yeah, no, that's wonderful. Yes, that we are evolving more and more. So Bodhi is equivalent to Buddhi, is that correct?
Yeah, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Bodhi. I guess it's Buddhi, yes, Bodhi. Yeah, not Bodhi. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And but that for me, then in manas, the it affects our astral body. In buddhi, it affects our life body, etheric life body. And in atma, it's our sentient will forces, our body are affected. And as from my standpoint, then the would be an incarnation or well, anthroposophia would take form within the astral body in manas. The Isis, Sophia, would take form within buddhi, and Christos Sophia would be in the sentient will forces of the body to transform those. And so that's just my understanding as I see it. And I could go deeper, but I don't want to offend your your world.
First, well, and I know it doesn't offend, but it's these are topics that probably need to be introduced to people that may not understand what the terms mean. But what John is talking about is there's a coherence or so, whatever the word may not be exactly right, between Atman and the physical body. And so this is, physical body is the part of the personal everyday self. So the seventh is Atman. And then if you go up to the second, there's a correspondence to buddhi. So this is the etheric double. And then if we go down to manas, it corresponds to higher manas, and kama manas is mixed in there. So I don't have that explained very well. But anyway, and so eventually we are going to be working toward the Christus Sophia, which is the spiritual self in all of us, and more of the opening to that as we live all the time.
Okay, I didn't know you used the word. So, Christos Sophia. So.
Yeah. No, you said it. So, yeah, that's a topic, its own lecture. It's wonderful. The coherence of these traditions around the world is just tremendous.
Mm-hmm.
So, is there another comment from anybody? So,
I have this burning question. I don't know if it's even serious or not, but let me ask. You were talking about Atlanteans and their use of aqueducts and water, but they were in the etheric body, right? So I'm not quite understanding why they needed water at all.
Yeah. So, well, the Lemurians were still spiritual, astral, but into the Atlantean root race, they became more and more physical over these millions of years, and eventually were physical. And that's where the separation of the sexes took place and full physical manifestation. And we were bigger. We were 30 feet high. So we were at that stage where they needed water to support human life. Then they were building the aqueducts.
Got it. Thank you.
So it's really a long span. In fact, Blavatsky describes Lemurio-Atlantean, because there's so much that kind of blended between this long, continuous evolution. So yeah, no question is not appropriate. They're wonderful. Shows your interest. So
I think Christopher is raising his hand.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Sorry.
great. Yeah, I couldn't.
One last question, specifically about these different stratas and different layers and levels of understanding how things happened. Is there any, like, I know the books are just, you know, very dense and very thick, but are they broken down into, like, not parables, but like little miniature bite size, you know? I mean, I don't know, like, is there a way, like, to understand, like, the different levels by not having to digest the whole thing all at once, you know,
Exactly.
because it's so hard to
Yeah.
tie it all into one cohesive, I don't know, that's my question. So
Totally. Yeah, it's quite dense, quite something. Now, on the website of the National Theosophical Society, it's theosophical.org. There's some links for some studies of what is theosophy or the Secret Doctrine. But I wanted to show you this book, The Secret Doctrine Abridgment. And I like this. Some abridgments aren't very good. I don't like the Isis Unveiled one, but this is by, it's under Christmas Humphreys. And so the first person is Elizabeth Preston and Christmas Humphreys.
okay.
And I find it really good because this extracts of the Secret Doctrine, but with descriptions in between that give you much better insight. So I read the Secret Doctrine and then got this because there were too many things I had no idea.
Yeah, because I was just surprised you can condense all of that in like the time frame we had. You know, I was like, wow. I mean, this has only been an hour, but it feels like it's been eons. You know, and it's amazing how much you can compress that much information into our brains, into our psyches about how we came to be. You know, that's just,
yeah, it is quite amazing.
it's amazing. Yeah, it's incredible. Thank you.
And if I can make another comment to Christopher's point, and of course I'm new to this, but Divine Plan is another book that might be really good. And I just started reading that a few months ago, but I'm finding it very insightful. It's a commentary, so to speak, to all this material that is laid out in a very systematic way that makes it very easy to digest. Oh, not very easy, I take it back. It makes it easier to digest.
Oh, thank you very much for that recommendation. Perfect. I forgot. Yeah, but it's a very good book, The Divine Plan. So normally at the end of a session, so we're almost coming up to an hour and a half, we have a brief meditation. Would that be okay with all of you? Because I participate in these by Zoom and they're very powerful, even though we're separated by distance, but we have this connection here. And so if there's no other question or comment, wonderful. So why don't we just take a moment of silence and think of the unity or the one life, and let us send peace and harmony to the world.